Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Data Warehouse Framework. My name is Alex Killian and I'm part of the marketing team here at XTIVIA. I'm here today with Steve Lloyd, who will be presenting today. Good morning, guys. We'll turn it over to Steve in just a minute, but I would like to give a quick introduction to Microsoft Experts powered by XTIVIA, just in case we are new to you. In short, we offer a focus on Microsoft products, including business intelligence, SSRS, SSIS, and SSAS, customer relationship management, Microsoft Dynamics, and data management with Microsoft SQL Server. XTIVIA also offers portal development, application development, and virtual database administration. You can find out more about Microsoft Experts at microsoft-experts.com or XTIVIA at xtivia.com. During today's presentation, you are welcome to submit questions using the GoToWebinar control panel, and we will try to address all of your questions before the end of the webinar. And finally, we will be recording the webinar, and that will be available on our website, microsoft-experts.com, within the next couple of days. And now I'd like to introduce our presenters. Steve is a Senior Business Intelligence Solutions Architect in XTIVIA's BI practice and works with our clients to plan and implement business intelligence and analytics projects. Prior to XTIVIA, Steve held IT positions in Fortune 500 companies, including Hewlett-Packard, Agilent Technologies, and Sprint Nextel, as well as a number of startups in business intelligence and analytics services. Steve will tell you he's held positions from software development and BI architect to blog writer and janitor.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for that intro. I would like to, I guess, jump right in and tell you a little bit about what we're going to cover today. There's three topics that we're going to take a look at, and the first one is a review of a case study, and it's a project that we completed this summer for a retail client. They were a bicycle company in the Texas area, and the focus there was really on integrated sales analytics, and we want to share that and some best practices that came out of that project. We'd also like to kind of segue then into the best practices in a more general sense around XTIVIA's data warehouse framework. And here again, we're going to be highlighting best practices and approaches with the goal of helping you maybe find some takeaways that you could benefit from. And the third topic is really to focus on cost-effective dashboard and report development. And again, this isn't going to be an extensive review of all ways to develop dashboards and reports today. There's a lot happening in this field, but again, we want to pull out and call out some best practices that will help you. So really the goal today is to help explain and share some examples in this case study that adopting some BI and data warehousing best practices doesn't necessarily commit you to a multi-million-dollar 5-year project. Really what we're trying to do is show that there's methods and approaches here that can help you build out your BI solutions incrementally. And we're going to start off by jumping into this case study to demonstrate this. So, as I mentioned, the challenge for the bicycle store was a couple of owners had purchased this store, and in this year they wanted to grow and build a chain of stores in the Texas area. And they were growing very rapidly. They started with 4 stores, and by the time we met up with them in the midsummer, they were up to 6 and had 2 more stores on the way. And really the need they had was trusted operational data. The management team needed to have access to sales at all of these 6 stores and wage expense. Those are their primary business key KPIs, and to really understand how are the stores doing on a day-to-day basis and what decisions could they make to help keep those stores on a profitable track. They also wanted to have visibility to inventory snapshot. And of course, this is bicycles and bicycle components, and there's a lot of inventory at these stores, and they needed to have visibility to what was selling and what the balances were. And of course, really the need from a reporting point of view is to get that information in an integrated format so they can look across the stores and see how they're doing across, and have their buyers be able to buy for the entire chain, and let management understand how they're doing from a profitability perspective. The other thing they asked for early on is mobile access, and they had worked with reporting solutions in the past, and they thought, wow, they really didn't want to log on to their PCs just to get this information. So we identified that as a pretty urgent need early on. It was in talking with them when we kicked it off, they really said, how quickly can you get us this solution? Because they were in the growth stage, and they just didn't have this information handy, and they needed to get it as soon as possible. And they were hoping we could get it done in really just a few months. The other thing that we identified in talking it through with them was they're not a big company. They wanted to fit their budget and also fit their staff skill sets. So the urgent need was really for integrated operational information. In terms of approaching this with them, the solution, we really wanted to start off with identifying their high-value information needs. What's the most critical? We didn't want to go at this as like boiling the ocean and trying to solve all their needs in a first release. And as we mentioned, we did identify those as sales and expenses across all stores, across a date range, and also analysis by bicycle brand, and sales volume compared to the staff expenses. So we focused, and we let these short-term priorities drive the scope for the first release. In terms of the solution, this is an eye test, so don't worry about trying to make this out, but what it illustrates is that we took what we call a dimensional modeling approach, and it's an approach that lets us model the business needs and the source information that's available. In this case, it was coming from their point of sale systems, and it got us all together. It got the clients we were working with, the business team, as well as our IT team, and our team to come together fairly quickly on what information is possible and to model that. We also, in that process, did what we call data profiling, which is understanding the quality of the data and completeness. And because it was a POS system, we put a lot of emphasis on understanding what the system keys, or how that data is integrated in the POS system, so that we could understand how we could leverage that in the data warehouse solution. So in short, really dimensional modeling was used to help us understand what information could be delivered. The solution, if those of you that have Googled data warehousing and architecture, this is a picture that we've all seen. It's been around for 30 or 40 years now, and really the reason that we're flipping it up here again is just to suggest that, or show that we still use this model, and it's very robust and proven. And really the approach we take is to take a slice through this and start with what we consider a proof of concept. But we don't take shortcuts. We built the extract processes and transformations and loaded it into some staging tables and created, you'll see here in a minute, we ended up creating a data mart with 4 subject areas. And by following this framework, it enabled us to build out incrementally and not really take the risk of having to go back and rework the solution later when there's new needs had come up. So those of you that have worked in data warehousing and even BI projects have heard of ETL. And again, we're pretty often keeping it simple is truly the best approach. And what we've done here for this project is take what we call a solution model for ETL, applied here to this client, to this retail bicycle store. And we built, again, sort of a sliver through this. And we started with product and sales and wage expenses, and we built a slice through this that ended up creating a small data mart. And from that data mart, we were able to develop rather quickly some reports that were very focused on that subject area. Again, sales for the current months, and in particular bike sales for the past 30 days. Once we created that structure, those of you who worked in report writing know that a big part of the challenge is understanding the quality of the data and the data structures you're reporting off of. By putting it into that dimensional model, rapid business intelligence development can be easy, and we moved very quickly. In fact, we finished this project in 6 weeks, and the last week was report writing. So we really had the database loaded and running in production in 5 weeks, and in that last week we tested as we were developing the final reports. Of course, the solution here is a focus on both management dashboard with KPIs, as well as in this project we ended up creating about 20 operational reports that were, we went a little beyond. I think the high priority, we identified about 8 reports that were needed for just most urgent operational needs, but as we were going through testing and continued report writing, again, because we had the data structure and the data mart built, it was very easy to continue to create sort of second priority reports, which we did. The other thing we did was we put an emphasis on introducing data management tools early in the project, in the very first release, and this was very important to us at XTIVIA because we wanted to help the client take ownership and adopt some best practices around managing their data. And there are some very sophisticated tools now to help do this, but we just start with some basic ones and for this application. And what we call a referential integrity report was one of them, and it identifies whenever the data is could be getting out of sync, if sales are happening to products and the product data isn't found, for example. And we created alerts off these so that emails are sent with gaps when they're found, and it's it's a cultural shift and a change management initiative that we're introducing here, even on a small scale, that we think is very important when we're introducing a new BI project. And the thinking here is, really when you have the structure, the report writing is pretty easy when you've learned the tools, but troubleshooting poor data is very difficult and it can take a lot of time. So that upfront design to create the framework for the data warehouse and build in data management tools enabled a much easier data troubleshooting and really expedited the report development. So in terms of results, for those of you familiar with data warehousing terminology, we had 4 facts and 13 dimensions. Facts are the measurements that we can report on, like sales amounts of products and dollar amounts and volumes. Time clock information is hours worked by employees, and inventory snapshot or on-hand balances at the end of the day. And I think for this project, we kept a daily data for 45 days and then month-end data, and we went back to the beginning of the calendar year so that they could do analysis across that inventory data with their BI tools. And then we also had a data extract from their payroll system, and that enabled to do comparison to actual sales. Products, these were the primary, I think I got 4 up there, dimensions, and there were some minor ones, but you can see the types of dimensions we were able to slice those facts by, so we could do things like, let's see sales by product for last week, or let's see for this vendor how much sales was occurred to which customers. And they had a dimension that called loyalty groups, where they could analyze sales by people and put them into silver and gold and platinum groups where they had benefit programs for them. The other thing is, we're all using mobile devices for lots of information access, but in this context of creating BI tools for the client to get in the customer's hands, whether it's management and even in some applications in clients' hands, it's really fun, and it made the testing and the adoption of the solution go pretty well, because you can pull up your phone anywhere and log on to, securely log on to your company's BI application and run some analytic reports. And that's something that's happened more recently that's really aided the adoption of these projects. Also, just a couple other quick facts around this project. We ended up automating 15 data extractions from 6 stores. So that's about 90 processes that ran and that loads data and transforms it. About a month and a half after we released, they added a 7th store. And because we had the framework in place, it took about half a day to put the code in place to extract the data, and another day working together to test it and updating a couple of reports. It really didn't take much time to add a store, and it fit right into the framework with the same metrics and measures as the other stores in an integrated view. And that's a big. I'm really glad we were able to do that fairly shortly after the first release to help everyone see that process. The other thing is, as a team, both with XTIVIA working with the client, we learned together how to support and extend the framework. That 7th store was a great example, but we could peel back the covers a little bit and build the extracts together for sales and wages for this store. And it was a great opportunity to see how to support and extend it. And those of us at XTIVIA, we feel pretty strongly about sticking to the rules, if you will, and working within the framework and keeping the extract code in its place and the transformation code in its place, and updating the data model with the same naming conventions and the same standards that we started with. And I think we succeeded in that. The technology choices, this was a Microsoft project. We used integrated services to do much of the ETL, and SQL Server reporting services for the reports and dashboards. And the reasons for that is, one, the client had already had some experience with SQL Server. They had an install, and their point of sale system actually ran off of it. But their IT team was familiar with it. So it was familiar. It is one of the more affordable solutions. This is about a $10 million company, and they weren't looking at Oracle or a larger solution. They didn't need it, and Microsoft's fully capable to meet their needs. So for this project, we were able to deliver on those short-term priorities, and actually there's what would be nice to show is, as we were going through this, we created a laundry list of other ideas, and other data subject areas. They have work orders and kits they call in building bikes, and all this other information they want to build in subsequent releases. And as those came up, we modeled them, and we put them over to the side and said, don't worry, we can see how to do this, but let's stay focused on these short-term priorities. And we were able to do that and build a scalable BI framework, and we did it in 6 weeks. So, so the goal of us being here today is for us to share some of the best practices, some of the takeaways from this project. And the first one, again, is to identify these urgent priorities and manage the scope on those priorities in the first release. And that's really a kind of a project management best practice. And all of us that have been through, projects, especially when you demonstrate success early, this can be a real challenge. You get a lot of excitement, and people all want their reports built. But this ability to stay focused is very important, and get a first release out as planned. The other one is, I mentioned it briefly earlier, but this dimensional modeling approach, it really it saves a lot of time, and it's intuitive enough that even business business management and business analysts can relate to it. It's a way of looking at data that allows us to sort of test our requirements against the source data. And eventually, from a data development point of view, we end up creating the databases to mirror this with some additional information very closely. So the IT developers can relate to it really well too. And it kind of brings the team together, and it without using words and ideas like data architecture, it essentially creates that. It drives the team toward the data architecture that's stable and extendable. The other takeaway here is that many retail point-of-sale systems, they have built-in key structures, and in this case, there were multiple stores that were using the same POS system. And in building complex data warehouses, the ones that can take quite a bit of time, a lot of the work goes into integrating data from multiple systems. And there's some great tools and best practices around simplifying that process and eliminating errors and risk. And one of them is to look at and test carefully and even work with, we got on the phone with the vendor and talked it through and make sure we understood their design. But you can eliminate some of the more complex parts of data warehousing, particularly for point-of-sale systems in retail organizations. And I think I mentioned a few times now, but adopting a data warehouse framework early on, even if it's a very small release, has a lot of benefits, and it doesn't necessarily take extra time. And that's we're going to segue into that topic here in a minute. But that is definitely a takeaway. If you're thinking about doing a project like this bicycle company, hopefully you'll investigate and explore data warehouse frameworks before you get started and look at what best practices you can leverage there. And the other best practice is getting support from your stakeholders and creating momentum and excitement in the team is to build a slice, and we call it a proof of concept, through the first project. We did it even in a smaller scale than the first release. We had those 4 facts and 20 reports, but fairly early in the project we created 2 reports, and it was just on sales, and we showed how it could work and what the reports could look like. And that was that's a great way to create some excitement. Even if you've done these projects before and you know you're headed on a good path, getting that out in front in people's hands early, being careful not to set expectations that they're looking at real data, or that they're expecting to run their business off of these early test reports. But getting them to see what's happening, it goes a long way in keeping support and excitement for the project. The other best practice I mentioned a minute ago was to include data management tools or master data management tools and processes from the beginning of the project. Again, a lot of tools now have these built in, and when they don't, many data warehousing consultancies like XTIVIA, we have a little library of tools that we've used over the years that we can pull out and plug in very quickly that will help make data management a priority in the business, and we can help with that change management if it's needed. And the last thing is once we've developed a data mart like we have here, there's a lot of appetite for reports, and if it's possible, getting the developers who are going to be writing reports trained up and comfortable before you sort of open the floodgates is really helpful, because they will be more successful, and the clients will be getting quicker responses to the requests, and that'll generate more momentum and success as well. So those are some best practices specifically from that case study. Now I'd like to segue a little bit into the little bit broader topic around building a data warehouse. And again, I hope you'll take away this idea that it does not have to be a large, multi-year, multi-million-dollar project to benefit from the best practices and frameworks. And so I want to share some of that with you here. The first concept is if you're starting building a bunch of little shacks, little databases of data that aren't planned and aren't connected, you're probably going to end up with a shanty town. Just a lot of poorly constructed solutions. But if you start with a plan that could lead to, can build towards a nicely built foundation with plumbing that is integrated and electricity that's wired through the rooms or can be extended easily, then it's a lot easier to end up there. So the first idea is that we choose from a framework, a data warehouse framework, and traditional data warehousing actually has two primary frameworks, and they've been around a long time. There's a gentleman named Bill Inman who introduced this one framework, the first one I'm going to show you here. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but this one, if you look in sort of the middle, it says you extract your data, that's that ETL portion we mentioned earlier, into a staging area of operational data that represents the source data pretty closely. And then it's loaded into what's called an enterprise data warehouse. And this is, for those data geeks out there, these data structures are typically in third normal form. They are structured to be very efficient. And from that data warehouse, data marts that are used for specific business purposes, might be accounting or sales or marketing functions, those data marts are generated from that enterprise data warehouse. I actually had an experience to work on one of these projects for a large global technology company, and it was a cultural decision to a large extent. It was a very big company, and they needed control over that enterprise data warehouse. They felt like they did, and that was why they chose this model. From here, you can see there's a BI analytics component, and today the tools here are so good and easy to use that they pretty much bolt on to well-designed data marts, and then user access is also pretty well matured and easy to manage. So without going into a lot more detail there, let me compare that to a second major framework, and it's the Kimball framework. Ralph Kimball is another leader in data warehousing, has also been around literally since the 60s and still has a thriving consulting company today and teaches classes in data warehousing. And he is kind of won out, I think. I think there's more popularity for his approach, and I'll explain it briefly. It's very much the same concept, the same structure, as you can see. But the data is moved to data marts kind of as quickly as possible. And it requires less development effort. It's very much focused around that dimensional modeling concept that we talked about earlier. So, and it's very much the approach we use for the bicycle company case study as well. So the goal is to get the data into a dimensional model with those facts and dimensions quickly. And that involves extracting data, cleaning it, transforming it, creating history versions of the data when needed, and structuring it all in this staging area, but then moving it right into data marts, and again, breaking them out by sort of business function area for sales, marketing, accounting, manufacturing, engineering, depending on the application. And then, if it's a large company, sometimes different teams will actually manage and modify the data marts. They'll kind of own them. And there's some, and other times the IT department will still want to retain control over those. So, so those are the two general frameworks. Now, the questions we usually get is, oh my gosh, these look so big. This is going to take a long time and a lot of money to develop all this. And the other part of the challenge that we face is that they already have a reporting solution in place, and you may find this true in your organization, where you might have a data warehouse, you might just have a lot of reporting databases, you might have you might write reports directly against your transaction systems. We see that frequently. So the next step is we recommend a build plan, choosing a plan that works with your organization. And again, the goal is to take small incremental steps to start solving your short-term problems, as well as adopting best practices that will fit into this data warehouse framework without a major investment in a long-term project. So one of the most common ones that we see, again, it's because usually the companies we work with have very urgent needs, and often, we just talked with a company earlier this week, they are writing reports directly against their transaction systems. They're having performance problems. They don't want to impact their sales operations because of reports running against them. And a simple solution like this, we call it the acquisition model, is to get the data off of the server, off of the transaction server on separate servers in a separate database, but don't do much in terms of changing the data structure. And that accomplishes a bunch of things. It starts segregating the physical architecture. It creates an environment where the BI team can work without impacting the production environment, and start creating reports. And sometimes there's some technology introduced here, and there's some learning curve there. But this can get results very quickly, and there's some nuances here. But the way you adopt naming standards and the program, the software used to do the extracts and loads, are the same software we could use later in the data as you scale this. From here, we often go to another step, another build plan, where that acquisition layer may be functioning for a while, but then it's clear that, oh wow, this data is named really weird. I don't understand the cryptic naming conventions that are coming out of the transaction system. Let's introduce some what we call a semantic layer to change the naming and make it more business friendly. And oddly, the dates are coming in different formats. It makes it difficult to query them and write reports against them. Let's standardize some of those dates. We might have codes that not everyone understands. Let's introduce some lookup tables and some descriptions. And then there's a little bit more technical things we do. We create what we call slowly changing dimensions when they're in need, which creates more of a historical view. For example, if you want to know what someone's salaries were or wage rates were back in time at different points in time to calculate profitability and comparison, you need to keep hold that data at different points in time. So there's a lot of questions here, but it's not. Again, we can take this on in small bites in a couple specific subject areas, and also we don't have to go deep in all of these. We often will do just the high priority transformations. It might be code values and descriptions, and it can move us forward quite a ways from that acquisition layer. The next step in a build plan is to take that into a dimensional model. And here where the A there in the green bar is aggregation, and that's commonly a restructuring on the data that's needed in that data mart. And it'll be rolling up those detailed transactions into data that's much more easy to report on. It also, there can be business rules that are specific to your measures and KPIs that are that can be captured and put in a centralized place and managed in your BI environment instead of the report writing. The report writers are even oftentimes, if you have reports, a user will download them into an Excel spreadsheet, and then they'll start applying their own business rules, and now nothing will tie out anymore. So this starts to change the culture a little bit, in the BI program, putting those business rules in a centralized place, and it gets a data mart built on a dimensional, using the Kimball approach. It puts it into a dimensional data model. So, the next step is extending that, getting to more sources, building more data marts. So really the takeaways, from that I hope you can take here is that there are a couple different data warehouse frameworks, and there's a step of choosing a build plan from where you are. Now, the bicycle company, they didn't have a data warehouse, so the build plan was very different than many companies that already have a reporting solution in place. But the goal here is to enable rapid development to meet immediate business needs. That could be either way. It could be just using that simple acquisition model that we talked about, or with a bicycle company, it could be building a slice through the whole data warehouse. And you can also meet these needs while building a future integrated warehouse using this framework. So that's what we're trying to recommend here. And it's recommending adopting a data warehouse framework early in your project. Okay, there's a couple other next steps that you would take. I'm gonna talk kind of quickly through here, but you know, obviously there's more to it than just having a framework and some build plans. You have to choose technologies and you have to build things, and we call these solution models. And again, because we've done a lot of projects, we've created sort of a library here of solutions. And they are specific to the client's application, and these have to line up with the business needs. They are technology dependent. You may be an Oracle shop or a DB2 shop. Well, we have teams of Oracle and DB2 specialists here, and those make up the solution model that we're working on. If it's Oracle, we might choose a different ETL tool set than if it's Microsoft. There's also staff skill sets, and we, you know, to be successful, we want to talk, you know, with our clients about that, and try to fit a technology that is going to fit well with the current skill sets and maybe where they want to grow and move towards. And then, of course, everyone's got a budget, and some of these tools are more expensive than others. So you can see there's some other components. This next slide kind of lists a bunch of things. XTIVIA, just as an example, in the technology space, we have Jaspersoft BI, Talent ETL. We work with Informatica. Of course, the whole Microsoft BI stack is one of our most common requested and used technologies for these applications. We work with a company called Information Builders, Web Focus Express, and MicroStrategy. So the point is that we have expertise in a lot of technologies, and we kind of choose the technologies with the ETL solution models. And this retail one I showed you is fairly specific. I mentioned that it had a point of sale system, had its own key system. That's very different than another application that has very dispersed data sources, and you need to do a lot of file management and key management. Database solutions, you know, some depending on the size of the data storage needs and cost again, but typically organizations have an existing investment in a technology, and we often design a solution model around what they already have for obvious reasons. And then on the BI and analytics side, again, there's quite an assortment of tools and technologies, and they kind of range from IT development type tools to more towards business self-service tools, where there's, you know, as many of you know, there's a lot going on in data visualization and self-service dashboard building, and these are now being optimized for mobile, and some of them are solutions from the cloud, which makes adoption very, very easy. So I highlighted in blue kind of what we did for the bicycle case study, so you can kind of get an idea of how that selection process works. So to summarize the data warehouse best practices, you know, I've said this a few times, but adopting that framework early is important. Choosing a build plan, choosing a solution model, and if this is a bit daunting, then work with a partner that can help you, whether it's us or somebody else that has this experience, and you can get your program and project set up well from the beginning and run it. You can get sort of help along the way, or you can have someone come in and really manage the work for you if you want. It's your choice. But getting that framework in place and getting these best practices lined up early can go a long way. Okay, third topic, and I'm going to hurry along because I'm a bit long-winded here. Is I want to share with some best practices around dashboard and reporting. And the first one is to talk a little bit again about the data, because reporting can be easy if the data is well understood and well structured. And one of the questions we get a lot is, I don't have a dimensional database and I want to improve my reporting today. And you can kind of take an approach it's kind of faking it. You know, you can create using database views and existing data. You can look for natural dimensions that exist in your data, and you might find regions or branches or products, and try to create some of those dimensions that are fairly stable. Get those from your source systems that are fairly stable. Things like date, it doesn't sound like much, but conforming to a date dimension gives a lot of flexibility. You can then all your report, and this is actually a script that you can run to create your date dimension. It isn't something that you get from your source systems even. You just have to make sure it'll join correctly to your source systems. But there's some best practices here that enable you to kind of simulate a dimensional database quickly, and it's often done. Again, this is called the semantic layer. You can rename the columns that the report writers are using, and you can create this set of views that start to look like a dimensional model and really improve the productivity of your report writing. The next thing I just want to share a couple more best practices that are kind of more from I talked to sort of the team here and tried to say, okay, what are some best practices that people may not hear often that would be good? And one of them is around dashboards. They really should be narrowly focused, I think, on the important data, but they got to be quick and easy to get to. And of course, mobile helps that a lot. But you just got to make them simple and relevant. The other thing you can do with them is you can create multiple versions, and you can have a version for accounting and a different one for your marketing team. And that way they can be modified and be more personal for the team, and you can put team resource links on there, and it creates a more sense of a personalized departmental portal. The other thing I would recommend to think about is we're all reading about KPIs and thinking that when we get into these projects, we often think, well, what they really need is a new KPI that reports profit in a different way. And I would recommend that you look at what people really are using. And in your interviews, don't suggest ideas, but watch what they're doing and listen very carefully, and give them what they really need first. It'll really ease adoption, and you can get a little more creative and start reinventing business processes and metrics as you go. The other best practice is, more often than not, there's some reports already out there, and the business teams will start comparing them. And unfortunately, your reports might be the new ones, and they might be more suspicious around the quality of those than the old ones, which often is not the case. So a management technique here for the project is to get together with those users and the business community and explain to them the rules. Hopefully they were involved in creating them. And as soon as you can, remove the old ones, remove the legacy reports, and decommission them, and don't give them the option of comparing them as soon as you can establish a new trusted source of information. And I think I mentioned this before, but spending time with your team, with your chosen technology, get training, do this a little bit behind the curtains first, and make sure everyone's really comfortable developing reports quickly, because the tools today really can develop reports fast. And having that skill set in place when you're rolling out the solution, the first release, will just keep the excitement level high and meet business needs very, very rapidly. I got one little other image here, or slide here I'm going to show you, but investing in developing a report style guide has really helped many of our clients, because when you have 5 developers, they're writing reports in 5 different ways, and some of them put sort of report descriptions on their reports, and others don't. It makes it pretty difficult to work with reports from different users. But if they have a common style guide, it's pretty nice. I'll show you an example here in just a second. And the next one is the mobile access, designing for mobile. This is getting easier and easier. It provides a high value, and again, it really makes adopting the solution kind of exciting and fun. and I'll say it again, but promoting a master data management culture early, and it takes time, to get people to adopt this, and often you need some senior management support to be effective here, and they might need to put some, some responsibilities and job descriptions to promote data stewardship. But on the technology side, there's some great technologies out of the box that provide excellent data management tools. So this is a quick slide that just shows kind of the spectrum of BI tools, kind of from IT development tools on the left that, at this day and age, there's Microsoft in particular, very mature tools. They have a broad set of capabilities. There's a lot of, they're familiar just because they're Microsoft, and we all use Microsoft products. They're easy to learn. There's a lot of skilled developers that are familiar with them. And they're often a little bit less expensive, but they can be a little more expensive to develop compared to the ones I'll mention here on the right. But they're predictable. You can get into them, and you know what you're going to get. You know how long it'll usually take. On the other end of the spectrum are business self-service tools. They typically enable very rapid development. They start to suggest, well, maybe you could. IT isn't needed to develop a lot of these reports, and in fact, IT is needed to set them up and to help out. But in extending the reports and customizing them, they are really maturing, and they add a lot of efficiency and productivity. They work best, I think, with a structured data mart like we talked about earlier, and data dictionaries and your structured data management tools, because then the business can really understand what they're doing and not take guesses. And they really enable collaboration. You can share reports and dashboards with a couple clicks, and they're sent via email. The data can be sent to a phone offline, disconnected, and they can do analytics on them, on those reports. They're really great collaboration tools. They tend to be a little bit more expensive until you start calculating the IT resources that aren't needed to develop them. So I think the bottom line is it's both a strategic, IT strategic, and a cultural decision of how you want and where you want your BI development to occur. This is, don't worry, you have to read all this, but this is just an example of a report style guide, and you can see just things like the same font and the same report title in the same place, where you put your date range, the scope of your data, and things like the description of the report. If you always put it in the same place, the users can go there and look, and they know what they're finding. And believe it or not, well, you'll believe it. You've all been through these, but when you see reports that are formatted differently, and it just gets confusing. But if they're all the same and layouts the same, and what's not shown here are things like subtitles and report breaks and totals and all those things, if they're formatted the same way, then it provides a bit of more professional deliverable from your BI program. So, in closing, for my part here, takeaways. Again, adopting these data warehouse best practices it's a process. It provides you a method to move forward. It's not a commitment to a giant project. Adopting a methodology can help you grow a scalable BI program. It's like building up building blocks, or building a house starting with a foundation and adding rooms that are taking advantage of the same plumbing and the same electricity. And for Bicycle World, we did this in 6 weeks, and they are now growing their solution with their own data warehouse framework. Okay, that's it. My marketing department would kill me if I didn't have a call to action for you all, and it's contact us. We have a free Getting Started guide that I think we're sending those that are participating today, and can be accessed on the Microsoft Experts website, and we are here to help. I'll stop there and for the Q&A.
Steve, this is Mangesh. I'm sorry, Alex.
Oh, go ahead.
That was a great overview, and we thank you, Steve. I know a lot of effort was put into this on your behalf, and our marketing team as well. So a job well done. And now I'll let Alex open it up for questions. I can see a couple of them pop up here. Alex, would you please go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. So our first question here, what was it about the bicycle store project that enabled it to be completed so quickly?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a couple things. One is I mentioned all the stores were using the same point of sale system, so that simplified quite a bit of what we call the e-tail process. The other thing is the team had a data warehouse. The owners actually had been in a different business where they had a data warehouse. They were starting this bicycle company, and they knew what it was about. And I say that, and also they didn't have one yet, which makes it easy. You don't have to go through the whole decommissioning process. But they trusted us, and they understood the benefits of the framework, and we didn't spend a lot of time getting consensus and arguing about approach, to be honest. And it just enabled us to get to work quickly, and it was also, we had a great team. You know, the client was smart and hardworking, and we were too, and just things moved along quickly.
Awesome, thank you. Another question here. You didn't say much about why Microsoft was chosen for the bicycle store project. So what were some of the deciding factors on that?
Sure. A couple of things. One is they did have SQL Server for their point of sale system, and their IT team had some experience, not a lot, but they had some with just writing basic queries against SQL Server using their T-SQL version of SQL, and not a lot more than that. But just starting in an environment like that the team is familiar with, it just makes the learning curve, go a lot quicker. And we did have to make some purchases of new instances of SQL Server in the software. They didn't have that for this application, and it fit their budget compared to other database vendors, and it offered a broad set of BI technologies, even some that they weren't using in its first release. We focused on the integration services and reporting services. We didn't do much with analytics services, which is a powerful analytics tool that comes in the Microsoft BI stack, and they were excited to have that capability even though it wasn't used in the first release. And I think the other thing is they knew that if they got short-handed, it's a technology suite that's pretty easy to find people to help them out with. I think Alex, those were the main reasons.
Okay. Next question here. I've heard that slowly changing dimensions to support reporting of historical data can be complex and require a lot of development time. Did you have one of these on the bicycle store project?
Actually, we did. We had one actually, and it was around from their payroll system, and it was capturing different wage rates. They had both hourly and salaried employees, and it was capturing wage rates at different points on a weekly basis, basically. So, but again, we have a number of, we have sort of a library of solutions, and for that particular application, it was a weekly change. It was called a Type 2 changing dimension. For those of you familiar with it, it was easily solutioned. The design was basically this Type 2 process where you can identify sort of a date range where the data was relevant and what the current records are, if you want to know what the people are getting paid today. But it's partly just experience, just knowing how to do this, recognizing which approach to use, and looking at some projects that we've done in the past. And it was probably one of the more complex, time-consuming parts of the project. But it went well, and again, we leveraged some projects we've done in the past.
All right. Well, it looks like we are just about out of time here, but thank you so much, Steve, and thanks for everyone who tuned in and listened. And have a great rest of your day.